How to hack a security system. Let's say it clearly and frankly, there is no magic method to write on the keyboard as we see in the movies. Imagine that you are sitting at a computer and you start clicking on the keyboard randomly. Numbers and symbols appear on the screen as if they were magic or a pharaonic spell. This method works for series and movies, but it is far from reality. No matter how hard we try and no matter how many keyboards you break, you will not be able to penetrate strong and advanced security systems. To achieve such an achievement, something completely different is needed. An important secret. This secret is not revealed to you simply and anywhere. We have to dig into the depths of the internet. Enter a world of mystery and secrecy. A world unlike anything you have ever seen before. Forget about the dark web and the usual hacker forums that we know. The subject is deeper and darker than all our imagination. We are talking about a place whose existence is based entirely on an absolute secret. A place where the smartest and most dangerous hackers trade their secrets for sums of money that could literally change their lives. In this place, governments, large companies, and even gangs compete over small pieces of information that could turn the world upside down. In this video, I take you with me into the flaws of the black market. Imagine that you are standing in front of a huge wall, built in a perfectly perfect way. How can you get to the other side? This type of wall is present everywhere on the internet, protecting the data of companies, countries, institutions, and even your personal information. When you buy a device or an application, you are not only buying the product itself, but you are also paying for the security wall that protects you from hacking. Therefore, when you take a program unofficially and use the crack service, you often take the software without the accompanying firewall, thus exposing your device to danger. But how are programs or sites hacked? How can you get around this wall that we talked about? Some walls are small, you can climb them or even break them, and that's exactly what. You can do this with SQL injection attacks, DDoS, and a few walls, so it doesn't even need force at all. You just need to convince the doorkeeper to open it for you, and this is called social engineering, but sometimes even the most powerful traditional hacking methods are not useful in this case. You need a smarter method. Bring your face closer to the wall and start carefully examining the bricks or stones. Maybe there is something, a cracked or slightly protruding stone that gives you a chance to climb the wall, for example, or it could be removable and reveal a secret passage behind it. Let's apply this concept to the world of software. Windows 10 and Mac OS X are among the most popular operating systems. Each of them contains about 80 million lines of code. If we consider each line of code as a stone or a brick, we can build a wall about 480 kilometers long. Now ask yourself a question. Among these millions of stones, how many cracked bricks do you think there are in this wall? In the programming world, a cracked brick is simply a security flaw, a flaw in the operating system that can be exploited and transmitted. The companies that build these walls do not like cracked bricks because their reputation and profits depend on providing a safe product. You will therefore find that they have complete specialized teams. They are looking for these flaws and can even pay huge rewards to anyone who discovers a new flaw in their systems. As soon as it is discovered, they release a security update or a patch that closes it completely. The value of the security flaw, therefore, depends on its age. A week-old flaw was probably discovered and filled 2 or 3 days ago. Some hackers may have started exploiting it, and the company is currently working on making this more likely. But if there is a flaw that no one knows about and that no one but you has discovered, that is to say that it dates from 0 days, then it is a completely different matter. The 0-day flaw is the real treasure of the hacking world because it allows you to bypass the protection. Without anyone suspecting your existence, but finding good vulnerabilities of this type is not at all an easy thing. You must be smarter, more competent, and more dangerous than all the security engineers employed by the company responsible for the firewall. Even if you are a genius in the field of programming, you can spend years looking for a single useful error that actually exists in the code, or simply look for someone who has found the vulnerability before you and is willing to sell it to you. You take vulnerability and he takes his money as a reward because he was the person who preceded everyone else in vulnerability. BigTrack is a mailing list launched in the early 90s. It was the main source of tens of thousands of vulnerabilities that used to be called zero-D vulnerabilities. At the beginning of this topic, hackers often tried to contact companies and warn them about security vulnerabilities in their systems, but in BigTrack, all you need is a smart pseudonym to hide your identity using a proxy, for example, and send your vulnerability to hundreds or even thousands of hackers around the world. The hacker community benefits from this information. The company is harmed, and you gain a reputation among your fellow hackers. Sharing and exploring security vulnerabilities was a major part of hacker culture at that time and a source of pride for most hackers. But over the years this has changed. The whole situation is as follows. Imagine that you are standing in front of a wall and you have to overcome it with difficulty. You have the money, you have the connections, and you have the resources. All that is missing is a little information that will lead you to the solution. You are looking for well-known names on PageTrack. You will find dozens of pseudonyms for very competent people who often work for free, and sometimes some of them have no problem selling as a service. You choose one of these young people, you send him a professional email, you make him an attractive offer. It must be an amount much higher than that which the company itself could pay it in exchange for an alert on the same flaw. With enough money, I expect that there will be almost no problems that cannot be solved over the years. Repeat the process several times to develop better communication skills and a wider network of relationships. Some of these hackers will be really trustworthy, while others will be dangerous, even for you. You will have to keep the trustworthy people close to you, but you will have to keep the dangerous people even closer to you. You are not the only one buying these vulnerabilities, nor the only one selling them. Over time, a real market will emerge for these operations. You will receive an email that will take you to the zero-D vulnerabilities that bypass any firewall. If you are having difficulty reaching the sellers, there is no problem. The solution is there as in any other market. There will be brokers, zero-D vulnerability brokers, and companies with names. Professionals with mysterious backgrounds are more willing to help you until you find the right person and conclude the deal safely. In addition, they will also make sure that the products they have sold to you are valid and document their effectiveness. You just need to buy part of the loop and try it on yourself. The next step will be to develop a malicious program that will transform this simple flaw in the code into a secret passage that will allow you to cross the wall with ease. Exploitation is what we can call exploitation. Is this a flaw or a bug? No, honestly, let me explain the difference between them. In short and simply, a bug or defect is an unintentional error or defect in the program code. It can be something simple, such as a button that does not work, or something more serious, such as a security vulnerability that allows attackers to access sensitive data. An exploit or exploitation is the code or method that a hacker uses to take advantage of the bug and turn it into a real attack. In other words, an exploit exploits the vulnerability to carry out a specific attack, such as data theft or device control. Let me give you an example that will make the difference clearer. Imagine that there is a specific defect in your door lock. A bug or flaw is the defect of the lock, while an exploit is, for example, a person who notices. The problem is that he sees you on the stairs, for example, and uses this problem to enter the house without a key. This means that not all bugs can be exploited, but that each exploitation or exploit depends on the presence of a bug in the first place. Let's get back to our story. This exploit is designed to hack iPhone devices via message. Any invisible message, no notification, no vibration, not even a dot appearing on the screen, just a small code that sneaks in completely silently and starts working. The attack is based on a security vulnerability in Apple's systems. It has been around for decades. It is the remains of an old job that the company stopped a long time ago, but it left behind an unprotected flaw. This thing is like a worn stone in a huge wall that we talked about at the beginning of the episode. As soon as this code infiltrates, it begins to control a very small part of the phone's memory. That is, enough space to perform a few simple operations using this memory. He begins to look for a new 0-second flaw in order to be able to introduce a more dangerous code into it. This flaw cannot be exploited from outside the device, but it becomes available as soon as it enters the victim's device. At this point, the second stage begins. The new code is more powerful and ferocious than the attack, launching a large-scale attack on the device's security systems. A quick battle is breaking out between the virus and the security systems, but to be honest, the battle has already been decided. Why? Because the hacker has a second winning card, a third flaw that allows him to completely bypass all defenses in a few seconds. The iPhone, renowned for its strong protection, becomes under total control, but the case will not end there. There is a final flaw, the fourth in the series, which gives the attacker full control over the Safari browser. At this point, the entire phone is at the mercy of the hacker. Everything that the owner writes and everything he sees, hears, or executes inside the device is transmitted directly to the party that launched the attack. This is a series of vulnerabilities that together form a tight four-step attack that the researchers called the triangulation process or Operation Triangulation. It's a strange name that doesn't really make sense. It means a process consisting of 4 steps, and they call it the triangular process. But whatever the name, there is no doubt that this type of exploitation is extremely powerful and dangerous. However, to achieve this level of control, you have to pay the price. How much? The price of this product, like any other product on the market, depends on the profit provided by one of the sources. The few people who reveal the prices of these zero-level exploits are notably Zerodium, a brokerage company specializing in the purchase and sale of security exploits. Sometimes they publish a list of their prices based on Zerodium's price list. A vulnerability that allows you to bypass a phone lock or a PIN code can cost up to $100,000. A vulnerability that opens a chat application, a browser, or an email from a specific person can cost $500,000. As for exploits that give you full control of the device without the user's knowledge, these exploits can reach $2 to $2.5 million. Millions of dollars to hack a single phone. This is of course in addition to the cost of an entire team of programmers and hackers who will work to develop this vulnerability and turn it into an effective tool. Frankly, these are not sums of money paid by someone who doubts his wife, for example, or vice versa. These are sums paid by large entities in search of much more dangerous and larger targets. However, the reality is that the real prices could also be higher than that, and we will never know. Not all companies publish their prices, and some work in the greatest secrecy. For example, in September 2023, a brokerage company called Operation Zero offered the highest price known on the market, $20 million for a chain of exploitation to hack a specific device. Why are the prices so high in this market? Is it really worth spending all these sums just to hack a phone? The answer is that the goal is not always so simple. Sometimes it's much bigger than that. Vulnerabilities are not only used to hack the phones of celebrities or politicians, for example. Some vulnerabilities open more dangerous and larger doors, such as access to computers. In sensitive companies and institutions, hacking of industrial control systems or programmable logic controllers, such as those that control factories and power plants, and the takeover of an entire network within a city, for example, or a military base. Let me give you two quick examples of the use of vulnerabilities in large-scale and famous attacks. Stuxnet. This virus used 4 zero-day vulnerabilities to penetrate an Iranian nuclear reactor and completely destroy it. The second example is the NotPetya virus, which used a single vulnerability and disrupted an entire country for several days, causing billions of dollars in losses to global companies. A flaw or a weapon. We have always said that a zero-day fault is like a broken or cracked stone in a wall, but in reality, the problem is much more dangerous. Security flaws have become like raw materials from which electronic weapons can be made, and sometimes these weapons are more dangerous than ordinary weapons themselves. With an appropriate set of flaws, a certain government can start a war. By electronic means against any other country or even against its own people, and if the budget and the experts were available, there would be no electronic security at all in the world. What makes the situation worse is that this market exists in plain sight and operates normally every day under the gaze of governments and competent authorities who cannot or will not stop it. But why, I wonder, is a market like this allowed to work, and why don't people treat it with the same seriousness as the conventional arms trade? The answer to this question is very complex. The zero-day vulnerability market is a large and complex system with several levels and a number of influential players from abroad. Today seem simple and harmless, and unlike what was the case 20 or 30 years ago, many companies offer reward programs for this subject, be bounty, that is, they pay money to anyone who discovers vulnerabilities in their programs, and in this way they encourage hackers to earn their money legally and improve internet security at the same time. Some companies and some researchers work on the same principle, but independently they look for errors in famous programs and report them to manufacturing companies. Sometimes they receive financial sums, but the most important thing for these people is that they gain fame or recognition in the cybersecurity community. This section, let's call it the white market, the tip of the iceberg, and that's what most people hear when they talk about zero vulnerabilities. There is, however, a second level below, a part of the market that does not have famous companies and that does not like to draw attention to itself, and researchers do not like to announce their discoveries. In fact, a lot of information is deleted or changed. This part is called the gray market. We cannot say that this market is legal, nor that it is illegal. Governments invest in research and hide what they discover from the general public. They pay hackers not to announce anything. Zero-day vulnerabilities are used for espionage and cyber warfare purposes. The subject is a bit difficult, unethical, and unregulated, but nevertheless, at a lower level, it is darker and more mysterious. Recently, the world has seen a very clear example of this level in an application called Moftet, which is simply a file transfer site similar to WeTransfer and OneDrive. Its interface is very boring, simple, and ordinary, and its market share is average. Most of the time, no one has heard of it except those who work in large companies or in a government office, for example. Before 2023, most of its customers were large companies such as Sony, Shell, and the U.S. Department of Energy. In June 2023, a major electronic ransomware gang called Club discovered a zero-day vulnerability was discovered in the Moftet program, and they immediately used it to hack the service and steal the data of all its customers. What happened next is the biggest electronic ransomware attack in recent years. The Club's list included more than 2,500 companies and about 90 million people, a very large number, greater than the population of entire countries such as Germany or France. The Club began to blackmail the companies and threatened to publish their secrets if they did not pay the ransom. We won't know exactly how many companies complied and paid, but the sums that were paid certainly made the gang very rich. All this is due to a single zero-day vulnerability. This is the black market. With all this chaos and disorder that we have been talking about, the market seems organized and clear. You see the good people who work openly and look for vulnerabilities in order to protect society. There are suspicious governments and companies that exploit vulnerabilities to excel in cyber warfare. There are also criminal gangs that buy vulnerabilities to steal data. Everyone has taken their place and is pursuing their interests. You can read more about this topic on Wikipedia, for example. However, the structure of the black market is clear from the outside, but when you start looking at the market more closely, the lines become blurred and things get murkier and worse. Let's go back a little to the triangulation process. He used 4 zero-day vulnerabilities to hack the iPhone. The process was discovered after researchers from the Russian cybersecurity company Kaspersky accidentally noticed its effects on their phones. Of course, the researchers admitted that this was the most complex and advanced attack they had ever encountered and said that it bore all the signs indicating that it had been carried out by an army of hackers supported by a country. And that country must be very powerful at the same time, the Russian Federal Security Service, FSB, which is the equivalent of the American NSA. This Russian security service announced that it had discovered the same attack patterns on thousands of phones belonging to Russian government officials. The security services said they were able to identify the attacker, who was the U.S. intelligence agency. The U.S. intelligence agency was spying on Russian citizens as part of an unprecedented international attack, according to the Russian Federal Security Service. An attack like this should have been coordinated with Apple, because the company would not have allowed vulnerabilities of this type to exist in its systems for no reason. But as we said before, a company called Operation Zero offered $20 million for the same chain of attacks, which of course indicates that the attack could have happened without the intervention of Apple, like most companies in this field. We know very little information about Operation Zero, but the only thing we know, and of which the company is proud, is that it sells its vulnerabilities only to Russian intelligence agencies and companies. The second thing we know is that the company was founded by a former employee of Kaspersky, the same company that was attacked via the triangulation process. So, can you summarize this issue concerning the American citizen who sold the zero-day vulnerability to a company like Zerodium, for example, which in turn would reach the NSA, the American National Security Agency? This activity will take place on the gray market, but if the same person sold the same vulnerability to Operation Zero, they would have entered the black market. If a Russian hacker discovered exactly the same vulnerability, the situation would be 100% reversed. Communicating with Operation Zero would make him a millionaire by connecting the nation, but communicating with Zerodium would most likely lead to prison. In reality, a small number of hackers live in America and Russia, and each country in the world seeks to excel in cyberspace, and each country determines its laws according to its alliances. Each country has its own white, gray, and black markets, and since the world is so interconnected, there is nothing. A certain government is prohibited from accessing the black market of another country. Well, it could be on a worse level than that. Zerodium and Operation Zero are very clear in their way of working. They sell their exploits to their governments and they are proud of it. But when we talk about brokers, the problem is completely different. Most companies that market zero-day exploits work in total darkness. No one knows who buys from them, who sells to them, or even who works with them and who their allies are. They often use secrecy to blur the lines between the white, gray, and black markets, intentionally or unintentionally. Because of all this secrecy and ambiguity, it will be almost impossible to impose any form of regulation on the zero-day market or even to prosecute anyone who crosses the line between the markets. The structure of the market is thus without regulation, without responsibility, and always within the limits of legality and ethics. This is a relative question. This market is complex and vast, and at the same time it is often invisible and unclear. It is difficult for people who hear about it for the first time to have a positive reaction about it. Of course, this is something understandable because talking about selling cyber weapons in secret is clearly something unacceptable, and these weapons could be used against any of us. The will to regulate this market, or even to ban it completely, is strong, even if it seems difficult, if not impossible. However, from another point of view, that of many people who have worked in intelligence agencies and who have seen governments use these zero-day flaws, is the same. To exploit a vulnerability in the PHP language, which is the backbone of the internet, be it the visible part, such as the page you are currently watching on YouTube, or the dark web, which you have probably heard of. The websites and servers of the dark web are also built on the same principles as classic websites and are exposed to the same vulnerabilities. At the end of 2023, someone discovered a cracked brick or a cracked stone in the wall of the PHP language. I don't know who discovered it or why. Of course, he may have discovered the vulnerability himself or bought it from a seller on the market. Then, he transformed this cracked stone into a passage. Thanks to this passage, he could enter any server and take control of any website in the world. However, the website that he decided to attack in this way was registered on the dark web and affiliated with LockEdit, one of the largest criminal gangs in the world. In just a few years, LockEdit has attacked thousands of people and extorted billions of dollars after stealing their data and demanding a ransom from them at the height of their activity. They controlled 50% of the global ransomware market. At the beginning of 2020, LockEdit was completely wiped out. Its entire infrastructure, consisting of dozens of servers and the accounts of hundreds of cybercriminals, has been hacked. The attacker was a combined force of judicial authorities from 11 countries around the world. The strike was so powerful that the gang was forced to rebuild from scratch and may never return to the top of the pyramid. The entire operation probably took place thanks to a zero-day vulnerability. It may be difficult to admit it, but sometimes governments and competent authorities really need to carry out a certain operation, and sometimes the operation only happens thanks to a well-thought-out vulnerability. Not everything we see or hear is entirely accurate and more vague than it seems to the average observer. The zero-day vulnerability market is a huge mess with a huge number of legal and ethical issues. Companies sell to criminals, governments and agencies pay millions to buy vulnerabilities, but it is considered illegal to use the same vulnerabilities against them. Criminals attack governments and administrations. Hackers and criminals are attacking, and hackers are the source of all this chaos and disorder, and people get their income mainly from this world, the zero-day vulnerability market. A completely secret and closed world, but as we know that some things mean, it is clear that someone has broken the first rule of the Don't Talk Out Fight Club. Sometimes those who disclose information are former government employees, for example, who disclose as much as they can without crossing the prohibited line. Sometimes those who disclose information are intermediaries and their goal is to attract the attention of potential sellers or buyers, and sometimes the hackers themselves who prefer to disclose this information despite all the warnings of their colleagues. If you have reached the end of the video, I hope that you have subscribed to the channel and that you have supported the video by liking and commenting on it. It really helps to spread the video. See you next time.